Moving on from more writing process stuff to broader insights, I guess you would call it. The first question ta is targets more of your history, I guess. Like, why did you
Mhm.
decide to become an author? What do you consider your purpose as an author?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's a complicated relationship for me with writing because when I was younger, I loved to write. I had a really great fifth grade teacher who, like, she loved to write, so it kind of pushed me to write. And I was always kind of an introvert, so I feel like writing is really good for introverts. It's a way for them to express themselves in a different way. But then I went to high school and I took some creative writing classes, and honestly did not do that well. So I'm like, maybe writing is not for me. And then I went to college and then took some more creative writing classes, and then that was like a more positive experience. So I just felt like I was constantly in this complicated relationship with writing, and I was trying to write stories, but nothing really, came out of it. But honestly, I feel like teaching really inspired me to write because like you're working with children every day. And so and you're reading to them almost every day. They're reading so many books. So I feel like when I was just watching them read or I was doing read alouds with them, I was thinking about like what kind of books do kids need? And that also connects back to like the why. And also, I think you said purpose, right? I think that also connects back to the purpose is, I wanted to write books for kids that is actually meaningful and important to them and will change their perspective or broaden their perspective. Um, I also was really inspired by other Asian American authors because when I was growing up, it was so rare to find a Korean author. Like, I remember going to the library and like skimming the titles and looking for a Kim, and it was never there. But in recent years, I've seen a lot more Asian American authors, specifically Korean authors. So I feel like that also inspired me and empowered me to try writing my own books. Um, and then specifically with the Magic Lunchbox, like that was again such a good first book because I felt like this is a really important story to tell and I need to write this. I really want to and I feel like I need to write this because I feel like this is a book that kids would need. So that was like a passion project.
Speaking of other authors and, Korean authors, what books or authors, doesn't have to be Korean, would
Mhm.
you recommend to those looking to improve their writing and why? Why those authors?
Yeah. So I feel like I can't really give like a solid answer on this only because I feel like you really need to read books that are similar to what you want to write. It's not necessarily like, oh yeah, like, Linda Sue Park is a big inspiration to me, but that's because, and I look to her books and I read them, to gain inspiration, but that might not necessarily be the case for someone who's wanting to write like adult books or like a dystopian book, right? So I feel like it's just important that you're reading lots of books that are similar to what you're writing. Like I remember with the Korean historical book was just a huge change for me because it's also not like a young children's book. But I was reading a lot of like June Her books. She writes more like romance, historical Korean romance. I was also just reading more romance novels in general because there is romance, and I was not really familiar with writing romance. Like that was a big challenge for me, and trying not to make it cringy. So I think just reading a lot, and my agent actually told me that too when we were starting to revise the Magic Lunchbox. She's like, read a lot of chapter books, read books that you want to be compared to. So that was always really good advice.
Just to wrap up this interview, the last question is, what is one piece of writing advice that you have for aspiring high school writers?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to think specifically high school too. One piece of advice, which is not just for high schoolers, is to use your experiences to shape your writing, which is something that I talk about a lot when I do like school visits and stuff, because even if you're writing a fantasy book or even if you're writing a science fiction book, even if it's not a realistic fiction book, if you put some of your own experiences or identity, I feel like it becomes so much more powerful because some of you is in that story, right? and you can relate to that part of your book. So I feel like that is a great starting point, and that makes it something that you're really passionate about. And then specifically for high schoolers, I say just write because a lot of people think that, it's too young. But I feel like having that, first of all, having the voice of a high schooler and you're writing like maybe like a YA book, that's so powerful because your voice is accurate, right? It's accurate to the voice that you're trying to write. And I feel like if a high schooler was to read a book by a high schooler, they would be able to relate so much more than if an adult wrote that book. So I feel like there's a big market for, younger writers and an author I really admire. She was 18, I think, when she published her first book. It's actually back there, These Violent Delights. She was like a freshman in
Oh,
college or something. So yeah, I think that we're seeing more and more younger authors. So yeah.
that's actually really great advice and very valuable for especially the people who will be watching this interview. And also really valuable advice for me, and I'll definitely keep it in mind. And just want to thank you so much for, agreeing to this interview, agreeing to share your thoughts, and just spending your time with me and our viewers today. So, bye everyone.
Hi.